Attention crew, this is your Captain Caliban speaking. This is a supplemental episode of Enterprising Individuals, where we bring you news and tidbits from the world of Trek, also interviews with special guests, and a few little surprises along the way. I hope you're enjoying some of your newfound freedom, the ability to be out, to see family and friends, and yet remain cautious and respectful. Me? I'm not going anywhere. I'm in the podcast mines 24/7. But who knows? I may soon be able to get out of the studio and work remotely, as I used to do before the pandemic when writing or editing. I'd go to a little neighborhood mom-and-pop patisserie by the name of Starbucks. In the meantime, we at the show are still working hard to bring you looks of excruciating detail at the series, characters, and stories of Trek, but today I present to you a sample of some of the other stuff I've been working on. Longtime listeners to the show will know that I and frequent show guest Gooey Fame host a totally different Star Trek podcast called BackTrekking, where we examine the origins of some of your favorite Star Trek episodes. Works of fiction, movies, TV shows, even real-life people and events have all served as inspirations for Trek screenwriters of every era, and in each episode, Gooey and I answer the question of where a particular episode of Trek came from. We also talk about thematic parallels found between episodes of Trek and popular entertainment, and sometimes we look at adaptations of Trek stories into new mediums. And just the other week, we did all three. I'm sure you're familiar with the original series episode, The City on the Edge of Forever. In addition to being a pivotal episode of TOS, it's been consistently voted as one of the best episodes of the original series, if not the entire Trek franchise. But do you know the circumstances of its creation? Do you know the specifics of the disagreement between the episode's writer, Harlan Ellison, and Desilu Studios? Do you know if Scotty was selling drugs or not? Well, if the answer to those questions is no, you are in luck. Gooey Fame and I recently talked about City on the Edge of Forever on BackTrekking, and in our inimitable style, we discussed the source of City, the original screenplay draft written by Harlan Ellison, which is a way different tale than the finished episode, which was rewritten heavily by Gene Kuhn and DC Fontana before it aired. Ellison won a Hugo for his script, but only part of his script made it to the screen. He wasn't happy about that. He was, however, thrilled that in 2014, IDW Comics produced a comic adaptation of the original screenplay of The City on the Edge of Forever, with art by J.W. Woodward and additional writing by Scott Tipton and David Tipton, entitled, let me see here, Star Trek, Harlan Ellison's original The City on the Edge of Forever teleplay. The original document, the Rosetta Stone, the text of the greatest episode of Star Trek that stars Joan Collins. And you're going to hear that right now on this episode. For all the differences, the original screenplay, it really is a great story, and it's an intriguing look at one creator's view of Star Trek before Star Trek was Star Trek. It was commissioned and written before the show ever hit the airwaves. So Kirk and Spock and the adventures of the Enterprise were merely hypothetical at that point. And anyway, I don't need to get into it here. We already do that in the BackTrekking episode, so get comfy and take a listen. If you like what you hear, feel free to subscribe to BackTrekking on your listening platform of choice, and give us a follow at @BackTrekking on Twitter for updates about new episodes. If you'd like to check out Harlan's graphic novel, and I strongly encourage you to do that, you can find a link in the show notes to where you can purchase it on Amazon in either hardcover or virtual form. That's it for me. I'll be back next week with a new episode of Enterprising Individuals. Enjoy the show. I gotta get the hell out of here. And with that, let's get underway. Hey, welcome back everybody to BackTrekking, the podcast where we look back at the real-world inspirations behind classic episodes of Star Trek. I'm one of your hosts, Caliban, and the rumors of Scotty selling drugs have been greatly exaggerated. I'm joined on this episode by my co-host.
I'm Gooey Fame, and I'm addicted to crystals.
We have returned to explore the stories behind your favorite Trek shows, and this week we're talking about possibly, literally, your favorite show. We're covering an episode that is consistently called one of the best episodes of Star Trek, the original series, but there's one man who would vociferously disagree with that estimate. He's the man who wrote the initial draft of the script that would become City on the Edge of Forever, and that famed sci-fi author is, of course, Harlan Ellison, who in 2015 teamed with IDW Comics to publish a comic version, a 5-issue comic version of his original draft of City on the Edge of Forever.
Yeah, this is going to be a hard one. I don't think we're going to be able to talk about these separately, really.
I think we got to take them both together.
Yeah.
And we can talk about some of the differences between the two and why they are that way, and Harlan's reactions to them, which are legion. He was, of course, a very vocal guy. He was also a guy who found himself butting heads with some of the people that he worked with for good or bad reasons, but we can talk about that when we get there. I think when the documentary that they put together that's about your life and work is called Dreams with Sharp Teeth. That says something, both about your work and possibly about your working relationships with the people around you.
He left a legacy.
He certainly did. He was an interesting guy, and of course, he passed away in 2018. But yeah, he was an interesting guy. Contributed, of course, quite a bit to science fiction and science fiction media. But first of all, let's talk about what's going on in our lives. What's going on with you, Gooey?
Not well,
Okay. And that's the end of our subject. What's going on in our lives?
I've been gearing up for some music stuff, so it's just around the corner. But with one of my bands has an album coming out, and we've released some singles from it. And then later this year, we're both my bands are gonna be playing shows and stuff. So I'm excited about that. But right now, it's kind of low key. But looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's good news, though.
Yeah.
I guess with, the CDC says it's okay. It's okay for your band to play shows.
Yeah, well, and the stuff we have is even further out than that, so I feel pretty, I'm not too worried about. I mean, I guess anything can happen, though, at this point. Who knows what could happen between here and, October, but the stuff we've had announced, my band Annabelle's playing a show in September. It's an album release show for this other band called Sincere Engineer, and I think people are just really hyped to go to live events because the show sold out in 2 hours. So, which is it was pretty quick for that. Yeah. And I just think that's been the case for a lot of bands right now as things are starting to sell out. I'm hoping by then it'll be even more okay to go, but I guess you never know.
There's people are chomping at the bit to get back out there. Of course, there's a segment of the population, and maybe I count myself among them, who were always going to feel somewhat reluctant to dip a toe back into society. I mean, I don't know what I need to worry about. I've got my vaccination and everything, and the CDC says A-okay, but there's definitely people who are still reluctant. There's a big convention in our area, kind of one of the big local cons that had to cancel last year, of course, as everybody did, and it's scheduled to start to run in early August, first week of August, and I know that the ConCom itself is just sort of throwing up their hands CDC, and everybody says that it's going to be okay. If the venue, if the hotel decides it's not okay, we won't do it, but we're just by default kind of going forward because it's just, hey, it's time to get back out there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I know that of the 6,000 people that usually attend, I know that a lot of those people have just said, nope, see you in 2022. And just aren't going to be coming. So it'll definitely be a smaller show this year, but there's still some reluctance from people to get back out there.
Yeah, I mean, and that's fair, I guess,
Not Annabelle fans.
No, I guess not, no. I'm sure it's more the Sincere Engineer fans, if I'm being honest. But, yeah, that's the thing. It's hard to, there's so many, fixation right now on what every individual person is deciding to do, but really, I think any cause for confusion and stuff like that comes from sometimes the announcement of oh, it's okay, and then it's but don't, if you're not vaccinated, you should wear a mask. And it's if you want people to wear a mask, you should have just said keep wearing masks, and which I'm at work and I'm wearing them still. I have to, and when I go out, I still am. But again, I think that should have been, it's just so confusing.
That's the funny thing that it took like state and local governments to pass mandates in order to get businesses to comply with masks. You know, when they were recommending strongly, you still had businesses that were like, yeah, whatever. And then when governors and mayors started saying, no, everybody's got to wear a mask, then the businesses had to comply. Now you've got a situation where the CDC says, don't worry about it. If you're vaccinated, it's fine. And businesses are like, we're going to keep wearing the masks. Mm-hmm. So it's a total sort of inversion as far as that goes. And I mean, everybody's got their own opinion and everybody's going to have their story in the years to come about whether they do, what they decided to do. I think it's really interesting that we do have information about the pandemic of 1918, but not a lot of colloquial information. Like we've got records and history. This happening now 100 years later in the digital age, assuming that we are going to hold on to all these posts and tweets and things, because I don't know if that's for sure yet. In another 100 years, we'll have many, many detailed records about what people's thoughts were and their decisions. Hopefully it'll be completely different than the situation we've got now, where we look back to the past to a very similar illness and pandemic and have very little information about what people did day to day in dealing with it.
Yeah.
Just died, I guess, because the death rate was, of course, a lot higher then.
I've been kind of actively, like, of all the things I'm going to, like, argue about on there, like, I've just not really gotten into it because it's, like, not because I'm, like, worried about what other people will think, but it's just, like, it's so draining, especially just because and again, I'm not saying like, oh, I can't wait to rip it off or whatever, but like for me, it's just an everyday thing. Like I'm at work 40 hours a week wearing a mask and blah, blah, blah. And, when people, like I have my own personal thoughts and like, I've judged plenty of people over the year who come in or, assholes and about not wanting to wear it. But I've never thought like, just like posting about this online is really going to change anything. To me, it always either feels like a waste of time or for self-gratification or some combination. And I'm just like, just do your, I don't know. I don't even know.
Yeah. And we have like accounts of what happened at the time. We do know that there were people that, resisted. There were people that didn't, formed anti-mask leagues or whatever. And they did, they did try to open up again when it seemed like they were in the clear, and they weren't. And then there was a second wave and a third wave. And if there was a Twitter back then, I'm sure you'd see a lot of the same kind of things. You just hear them in an old-timey voice, and they'd be a lot more racist probably. People don't really change all that much, but it's just weird that no real media came out of it. Of course, we had the Roaring '20s, and you've got things like The Great Gatsby, and you see people reacting to surviving a tragedy and danger like that. But there just isn't a lot of like media. There's not a lot of like drama or literature that frames that era the way that we'll be able to at least look back at people's reactions to it. Songbird, the movie, is apparently really terrible. That's the Michael Bay produced pandemic
Oh, yeah,
thing.
We're going to get a lot of that, I'm sure.
I don't know if we really will. I don't think people are going to want to really watch things about people being stuck inside or having to deal with, viruses. I mean, we'll get the usual like zombie movies and things like that, but I'm not sure we're going to get a lot. There was some kind of HBO project, and it was like a pandemic thing where John David Washington and Anne Hathaway are like jewel thieves, but also the pandemic's going on, which is just like, that just seems thrown together. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I don't think that like Scorsese or any great American filmmakers are going to go, no, this is the pandemic movie. I'm not sure we're going to get that.
I was sort of imagining like 10 years from now, or maybe even a little later, there'll be some like twee movie, and there'll be like scenes randomly in the middle where they're like wearing a mask, but it doesn't even really mention it. It's just like, oh yeah, it took place in 2020 for a minute. But I don't think it'll be about any of that. Maybe.
It's all what, the writers of tomorrow, or I guess today, who are writing things for tomorrow, decide to do. And then, of course, it's all filtered through what a Hollywood studio will greenlight. So, I don't know. There's like, if you look at something like the destruction of New Orleans in Hurricane Katrina, there's like one good thing, and it's that HBO show, Treme, that was made that was already being made, and planned pre-Katrina. And then, of course, all the themes that they wanted to tackle, which is like governments just leaving their people, stranded, were made manifest and real with the actual hurricane. And so that became a focus of the show. But there aren't like a lot of like Katrina based sort of, or, disaster based things that came out of that. So
yeah,
I don't know. It all depends on what fits into the, narrative, capital M.
Yeah. I thought there would be like a market for like, we're processing the trauma of 2020 or something, and like I don't know, stuff of like maybe even like the January 6th stuff and all that.
Well, I was going to say that was the market right there. Yeah. Turned out it was a performance piece, a live action performance piece instead of a feature film.
Well, who could do it better? Yeah.
Well, I went to a wedding last weekend and it was beautiful.
Oh, awesome. So sorry we focused too much on that and we didn't really get into what you're up to.
Well, that doesn't matter. It's like the first like event, with other people that I've been to in 18 months. And, it was great. It was small. It was designed, I think, around not wanting to have people be too impacted, so it was a smaller ceremony. It was really short, and it was sort of the reception and the wedding and everything took place kind of in one room. And it started around 10, and it was basically over by like 1:30 or 2. And
that's right. That's nice.
Yeah. And so it was just family and kind of close friends. And it was a lot of people that I had gone to high school with, but hadn't seen in a long time. And yeah, it was, I was vaccinated, a couple days before. And so I figured we were probably okay to go. And we had a good time and people were careful about things. And yeah, it worked out. So if that's what the future looks like, at least our immediate future going forward, I think we're probably okay.
Yeah. I'm feeling like pretty okay for now. I guess it's more of the long term, the big picture of everyone getting vaccinated is probably in the long run what's going to matter. But at the moment, I felt like, I went to a movie. I felt okay going to a movie. So I was like, yeah, sweet, I'm vaccinated.
That's the next step for me, going to a movie.
Yeah, it was a big moment. It felt real.
That and, I've got to build up, of course, to be ready to go to the Star Trek convention in Chicago in the spring of next year.
Yeah,
so,
I really hope things are worked out by then.
Yeah, if things aren't worked out by then, we're in real trouble.
That's like what I said. I'm not counting on it. Like, I feel like it's probably, I just always keep low hopes and then, maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised, but.
You gotta keep high hopes. That's what Brendan Urie says.
I'm doing the Mayor Pete dance right now.
Yes,
you can't see, but
I listened to half of the whatever the Panic at the Disco album is that is their big one the other night, which I'd never heard, and I thought everybody's talking about this Brendan Urie kid, and emo is still around, so I'm gonna listen to this. I liked it.
Was that the old one with like the "What a Beautiful Wedding" song? That one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I never really listened to it.
All their albums and songs have these ridiculous titles. They're worse than Led Zeppelin, but yeah, but whichever one that is, and I was like, okay, this is. I can't really tell. When a new song starts, the songs kind of sound the same.
Okay, yeah.
But I like the sound.
I might like it if I give it a chance. That song, when I hear that song, I'm like, it's now kind of a little nostalgic because I just heard it a lot when I was a teenager or whatever.
Yeah.
So now I'm like, okay, I can kick back to this.
Well, let's talk about what we're burdened with talking about, and that is our subject for this week's episode. When conversations begin about which episode of Star Trek is the greatest, one title will always factor into the conversation, and that's The City on the Edge of Forever. Originally conceived and written by legendary sci-fi author Harlan Ellison, the initial draft of City would eventually pass through the hands of many of early Trek's greatest writers, including series creator Gene Roddenberry. The resulting episode has been hailed as a triumph of televised sci-fi and one of the greatest hours of television in broadcast history, but the final product strays significantly from Ellison's Ellison's original vision and started a debate about the vision of an individual creator versus the adaptation of a work by talented collaborators and the practicalities of real-world television production. But Ellison was never one to let anyone get the last word, and he republished his original draft of City several times in the decades that followed the initial airing of the Trek episode. In 2014, Ellison teamed with IDW Comics to produce a 5-issue miniseries of his original draft titled Harlan Ellison's The City on the Edge of Forever, the original teleplay.
Captain's log. No star date. McCoy has changed the course of time.
What are you?
I am the guardian of forever.
Now. All right, come on.
Oh, how careless of your wife to let you go out that way.
What?
One day soon, man is going to be able to harness incredible energies, maybe even the atom.
Speculation.
I find her most uncommon, Mr. Spock.
Murderers! Assassins!
I'm in love with Edith Keeler.
Edith Keeler must die.
Load him!
Harlan Ellison is he's an interesting guy, and I was reading. There's a whole chapter in the book Inside Star Trek about the making of City on the Edge of Forever, and Inside Star Trek is by Herb Solow and Bob Justman, the producers of the original Star Trek and also of the first season of TNG, and it's their oral history, their memories about the situation. And so they tell behind the scenes stories, and they talk about how Ellison was not Big H, Big E Harlan Ellison at that point, but he had won a Writers Guild Award for an episode of The Outer Limits that he had written called Demon with a Glass Hand. And he was kind of like an upcoming, voice in sci-fi. And he was one of the many sci-fi authors that they reached out to write for early Trek. We've already talked about episodes by Robert Bloch, Theodore Sturgeon, like these sci-fi greats that they brought in, Richard Matheson, to give legitimacy to Star Trek, because sci-fi fans, hard sci-fi fans, were disappointed with a lot of Trek or with a lot of sci-fi on TV because it was for kids. It was Danger Will Robinson, it was goofy stuff, and sci-fi or Star Trek was supposed to be serious, and Harlan Ellison was part of that effort. And they brought him in and they asked him to do this, and he pitched this idea. And the process of the pitch to the getting the draft was almost like a year. It took him a long ass time to write this.
Wow.
And to be fair to him, they got the original draft and said, "This is fantastic. Don't tell him this. He does not need to hear this, but this is fantastic. But we can't do like half of this. There's just no way we can do this. He's not writing for a TV budget." And, so they asked him to do it again. And it took him, another 4 or 5 months to get the second draft. And at this point, they're like, we need to shoot something because we're a TV show. This is a schedule. So they took it away from him. And they had a guy named Stephen Karabatsos, who was the story editor on the show, write another draft. And they didn't like it. And Ellison said, no, just look, let me do it again. So he did it again. Eventually, they had to take it away from him. Dorothy Fontana got a pass at it. Gene Kuhn got a pass at it, added some of the comedy that's in it. And then, of course, Gene got his customary final rewrite. And so it went through the hands of many people. And we'll talk about the differences between the original manuscript and the televised episode. But it was a lot different. And it was different to the point where Ellison was pissed because, of course, he was. And so he did what he usually does in that situation. He said, I want my name taken off it. And I want, my pissy pseudonym, Cordwainer Bird, to be put on it instead. That's his Alan Smithy. And that's his message. Oh, wow. That's his message that this is out of my hands. I don't like this. And Gene had to basically say, I'll ruin you if you do that. He basically threatened him and said, I'll make sure that you never work in this town again. Which is harsh, but it would have invalidated the reason that they got him in the first place. Because it would have sent a message to sci-fi fans who are watching Trek, this new show in its first season, that Trek does not care, does not respect, sci-fi writers, which from Harlan's point of view, they don't. But from the point of view of the production, they do. They're just, it needs to be something that we can actually do.
This would make a great movie.
Wouldn't it though? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like thinking about this. I'm like, okay, I see where he's coming from.
To dramatize, the behind the scenes thing.
Yeah. So dramatic.
It'll never get made. I'll tell you why. Because as we've discussed previously on this show and other places, Paramount can't make fun of itself. It has no sense of humor about itself.
Yeah.
And you would need that for the behind the scenes kind of look. You need to see that. And the hagiography around Roddenberry and his legacy is just too much. Did you ever see the Chaos on the Bridge, the documentary Chaos on the Bridge?
No, I've never
It's
seen
basically about the later years of Roddenberry and the creation of TNG. And I'm not sure who produced it. I'm not sure if CBS had any involvement, but it's actually pretty frank. And they talked to people like Maury Hurley before he passed, and DC Fontana and David Gerald about all the shit that went on behind the scenes when they're just trying to get this show, TNG, to the screen. And that's kind of what like Inside Star Trek is about. It's got a lot of that stuff. Bob Justman would talk about how they basically just gave Harlan an office on set or on the studio grounds to work in because they wanted to keep an eye on him.
Wow.
But he would get bored and he would lock the door of his office and like turn the music up, and then he'd do like an Indiana Jones like out of the window and then just like wander around the set and like chat up the alien girls, and they have to chase him back into his office and make him work on the script.
This would make a fantastic
it would be great.
movie. Every detail you're telling me.
Yeah, absolutely. But I just don't think that'll ever get made.
No, I totally agree. I think too. Yeah, they're always hesitant, or really anyone is hesitant to like speak negatively. I think about certain elements of Star Trek when it's like it's okay. We can be grown-ups and talk about these things honestly.
Yeah, how long does it have to go before it's history and it doesn't affect anybody? You know what I mean? Like they're working on aren't they working on a Lucy biopic right now? And if we don't have a scene of Lucy backstage, sucking on a cigarette, while she's telling somebody to like go fuck themselves, that you're going to get that scene, right? You have to have that in your
I guess
warts
so.
and all look at the life of Desi and Lucy.
But this, what I would expect more out of it is like, especially like this fake Star Trek one that isn't happening, but it like the Bohemian Rhapsody kind of effect.
Yes.
From at least what I've heard about it, I haven't seen it, but where it's like all the people involved get to like put their stamp of approval on it. Yeah. So I'd expect
Paramount.
This
Paramount is the Brian May of this situation for sure.
Right. Yeah. Where it's like we would just have to make Harlan look as ridiculous as possible.
Which, of course, I mean, you can't avoid him getting mad over that.
Well, yeah, but I guess that's what makes this story so compelling to me is that, like, he does seem kind of, like, bullheaded and stubborn, but...
does he have a point?
Being, like, threatened, you'll never work in this town again.
Sure.
It's just like...
And and at this point, he's a youngish writer. I mean, he's definitely sort of new to Hollywood, and he's still, making his bones. And to hear that's got to be pretty scary and traumatizing. Now, he's never really let that stand in his way. He's always somebody who is attack is his response to everything. In 2009, like right before the new J.J. Abrams movie came out, he sued Paramount for back pay and royalties over all of the intellectual property in City on the Edge of Forever. And he basically like claimed that he's, like a quarter of the entire franchise should be his based on Guardian of Forever, Edith Keeler, time travel, all the things that are in his script. And the thing about Harlan Ellison is people settle. He must have a really good lawyer. I don't think he got a lot out of it, but he did get a settlement out of it. And then right after the settlement, he turned around and went, I know you guys are trying to fire the movies up again. If you need any help, I don't have a representation at this time, but I'd be willing to write to call JJ, do whatever you want. It's like, is this guy for real?
That is a sick move, honestly. I gotta say, I respect the hustle, and I don't have a problem with him doing this because who's paying him? Like Paramount? That's fine. Like,
sure, yeah.
Get that bag, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Secure the bag. That's
Right.
the Harlan Ellison way. Absolutely. So yeah, it didn't exactly turn out exactly the way that he wanted it to, but it still was an unqualified success. I should note that while he's doing this, while he's arguing with Roddenberry over his script being changed, he is in the process of forming the Committee, which was a group of sci-fi authors that, at Gene Roddenberry's behest, basically organized and approached the network to keep Star Trek on the air. Everybody knows about the big letter writing campaign at the end of season 2 to save Star Trek, but Star Trek was saved by sci-fi authors and writers, members of SIFWA, the Sci-Fi Writers Association, who Isaac Asimov among them, who appealed to the network to say, this is important. You guys don't know what you have here. This is real deal sci-fi on TV, not kiddie stuff, and you have to give it another chance. And it was successful, ultimately. So, we have more than just the City on the Edge of Forever to thank Harlan for.
So he is owed more than,
That's why he's suing everybody. Yeah. He wants to get paid. So after this aired, it was an unqualified success. Of course, Star Trek returned to TV for a second season, and he won a Hugo Award for the script. He also won a Writers Guild Award in 1967. And Herb Solow or Bob Justman, one of them in the book, tells the story of how this had sort of, the tension had died down. Everybody was happy that it was successful, and they went to this, awards dinner for the Writers Guild Awards, and it was announced that Harlan had won. Now, I should mention there are 5 episodes in the category for dramatic presentation. They were all Star Trek episodes.
Okay,
but this was the odds-on favorite. This was the one that everybody was like, "This is it."
Okay,
and so they won, they won. It was announced. Harlan went to accept the award, and then launched into like a 20-minute long screed about how he was mistreated for this and that.
Wow.
And all the pressure that he'd been under and how unreasonable the production was, all while they're there at the table, just like watching this happen, thinking that this is going to be this night that's going to celebrate Star Trek, and they finally made it, and he's just going off on everybody. And
that rules.
And shaking his award, at them, and then finally, like, he finishes up with like, "Never let them rewrite you," and then just storms off the stage. And they're like,
"Wow,
oh, wow, great! I'm so glad."
Another
we
great
that guy.
scene for the movie.
That's a scene in the movie. Yes.
Wow, that's incredible. Honestly, I can't even be like mad at that. That's just sounds amazing.
We need to talk about the story that he created.
Yeah.
The episode, The City on the Edge Forever, and the comic as well. Something that I should mention, and maybe we can just go through the plot of it and just talk about some of the differences in both forms of it. But right off the bat, I wanted to say that one of the things that Roddenberry immediately objected to was the idea that drugs or drug abuse in any form would be a problem. Not who was doing it. The whole idea of Scotty selling drugs is something that Gene used to say, either knowingly or unknowingly, possibly knowingly, to bother Harlan, because Harlan really hated being misrepresented. Scotty was never selling drugs in any version or form of the script. But it's something that Gene would say in interviews when asked about The City on the Edge of Forever. But he hated that idea. So thank God he didn't live to see Raffi in Star Trek Picard.
Oh, yeah.
Or even see Garrick, who is a Cardassian, not part of the Federation, but abusing his drug implants.
Yeah, that's one of those things. Like, I was reading it, and generally there's a lot of stuff that I was like, oh, this is way more interesting than in the episode. And then, I see, like, this is a good change they did, like, on both sides of the issue. But the drugs thing, that's one where it's like, I I don't think that's like a very good hard fast rule for Gene Roddenberry to have. That's one of those things that I'm like, okay, I'm glad that we aren't just like Gene's vision all the time.
Yeah.
But in this story, it wasn't necessarily something that I was like I needed in this specific story. It felt more like a device to get the story going.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. There's, this was written or begun being written before the series was even on the air. There is a series Bible, but so Harlan, when he's writing it, he doesn't know necessarily the full character of Spock or Kirk or their relationship with each other. The drugs, obviously. I think somebody, the drug, he wants to get the drug, he wants to sell the drugs to be rich, right? So clearly there's money in the society still, which of course is a question that's been open through the existence of Trek, but certainly they're, they get paid in Harlan's future. And so all that stuff that would, whether Harlan likes it or not, all of that would be edited to fit the series so far when the episode finally airs. But yeah, I mean, he's definitely working off of his own kind of page as far as shaping the world of the 25th or 6th century, because they say it's 500 years, don't they? And of course, that would be reduced.
Wow. You're just throwing it out there at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting stuff, like, and it had some of the cooler panels of, like, the dude on drugs, or...
Yeah.
Like, that was one of the more memorable thing. And I thought, like I said, it was, like, not something I felt like needed to be there, but it was, like, I did, like, just some of these interesting kind of, like, darker elements, like, happening on, and in the panels, like, it's happening on, it's like, oh, this looks like the Enterprise of the show, it doesn't look like an adaptation. So it was kind of cool to just see it in that setting.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, that's weird,
Yeah.
So it was just like it was interesting just to see that like that way.
Yeah, I should mention that the city, that the miniseries is, of course, based on Ellison's original teleplay, which was originally published. So he, after all this went down in the mid-70s, he basically like copyrighted the original teleplay, which I guess that works. I don't know how working for hire works, but his original teleplay that he submits to them, he's not under contract, or he's not limited by contract. So he copyrighted that, and he had it published with some other things in a play collection or something in the 70s.
Oh, interesting.
And then several times later, it was republished. So this is based on that teleplay, and then it's adapted also by David and Scott Tipton, and then illustrated by artist J.K. Woodward for this miniseries that we're reading.
Yeah, so that was cool. It kind of like made it feel more real, just to see like, oh, they drew it just like the old sets and stuff like that.
Right, yeah.
Even like the scenes from that specific episode when they go to the past.
Yeah.
The drug thing, I did just realize, though, it works a little bit more to get the story going than... It's kind of silly in the episode that Bones is like, I'm a doctor. I wouldn't goof up this stuff. And then he immediately, like, accidentally stabs himself with it. Yeah. And it's like... Isn't there like a safety on this thing or something?
Yeah. I mean, the ship is being buffeted by time waves or whatever, but yeah, it is.
Yeah, but he's just, after he did it should be like immediately you put it away or something, but instead he's like, I'm going to hold it here and say this line.
Point it right at me. Yeah. It's interesting because I feel like that's covered in the script a little, because the doctor is being a little braggadocious after Kirk presumes to tell him how to do his job, and then he's like, "Oh, you want to give me some medical advice?" So maybe it's a little humbling moment after he's like, I'm super doctor. I don't need any help.
Maybe it's a little hubris. To be humbling.
Yeah. But they clearly, they start very differently. Like we mentioned in the beginning of the episode, the doctor is administering cordrazine, tricky stuff, to Sulu after he's injured and accidentally injects himself. Which drives him off on a quest to avoid the murderers and assassins.
That's why I think I liked that better. I think not because it was like get rid of the drug stuff, but because for me it was better to have McCoy, involved in the story.
I agree. I think, we'll just, I'll just say that in the teleplay, the story begins with a crew member named Beckwith, who is a bad guy. He's selling drugs to other crew members, and he murders a crew member who is going to expose him for selling drugs as the story starts. And so the inciting incident of the story is him in an attempt to escape, beaming down to the planet that the Enterprise is orbiting, this planet that, similar to the what we see on screen, is releasing these time waves that the Enterprise is here to investigate, and he gets away that way. And the character of Beckwith, as we go throughout the story, is not really a factor. He is the seed, he's the mote in God's eye. He goes through the Guardian of Forever and does something, changes something. We don't know what it is. And then he disappears from the story until the end. And that's essentially what McCoy does, and maybe we'll talk about it maybe when we get closer to that story point, but McCoy's journey through this story, I think, is a foil for Kirk's journey through the story as well.
It feels more whole in that way, whereas with Beckwith, they tried to add in this whole thing of like, oh, he was so bad, but he tried to save this person. And it was a little like, okay, like, I think Beckwith and all that could have been more interesting if it was like maybe explored more, like if there's more with him. Whereas like McCoy is just kind of like this guy we know, and it's just like these couple little scenes, and that ties back into Kirk's story. It works a lot better for this type of short type of story.
Which is what you would do with a weekly series. Not to take anything away from Ellison, but that's kind of a thing. You don't really... I mean, you can have a guest star of the week, but you're not usually introducing new characters who are going to take the action away from the main characters into a series. Mm-hmm. We get that in just before this, the episode before this, The Alternative Factor, where you've got the character of Lazarus, and he's like, this is really important. You got to do this. You got to do that. And the crew just sits back and has to watch Lazarus do all this stuff. And then Lazarus leaves with the other Lazarus at the end. They're like, that was a crazy time with Lazarus. And the show just kind of marks time for a week.
Yeah, I guess with this, it's like, well, one, the show's not a thing yet. So he's probably not thinking like, I got to have McCoy in here to give some more McCoy flavor. Yeah. But then on top of that, by using someone that's not a regular, you can have him do all these awful things and then also get horribly, brutally tortured in the end. Yeah. And it's like, well, it's okay because it didn't happen to anyone important, Right, yeah. Yeah, it's a horrible. And I actually had like my two favorite panels of the story where the guy's high, and then when the other guy's like in the eternal hell or whatever, I was like, yeah, that's sweet. But it was like, this is not really important to the story, but it was cool.
Right. Did he really deserve that? I mean, he's not a good person.
No, but that was, I really thought that was funny. that was such like an over punishment. That I just got a kick out of it. I don't know.
Yeah, we don't ever get the rules, and I don't know if there are rules to the Guardian, but at the end, it's like, I'm going to go for another ride. Nope, only one ride. Go to hell.
It really was like,
roast in hell forever.
We don't have to figure out what to do with him, when he's back on board. So let's. I like that he just immediately jumped back through.
Right. Yeah.
Like it made me. That was the best character moment for that character, was that he was like, I'm going to do it again.
I'm out of here. There's a tone. There's a dark tone that totally fits Ellison's own work, but I think doesn't quite fit in a Star Trek episode. I mean, even at this early point in Trek, part of it would be the presence of drugs, but also in his very first draft, Beckwith would have already been caught dealing the drugs and maybe committing a murder. I don't know. And so the reason that they're stopping at this planet is to execute him. Kirk asked the captain to say, according to the code of naval justice, is like, okay, well, you will be phasered to the neck until dead. And so they're stopping on this planet to do that. And he gets away, and they discover that this is a planet that contains this Guardian.
Well, again, I'm not opposed to I like when Star Trek can surprise you with how dark it can go, but it doesn't, like, that specific thing doesn't really make sense with what we know Like,
yeah, just beam him into space.
Kirk, that's not something Kirk would actively do. So, yeah, I can see why they changed that, but I think that has to do, with more of like not fully knowing like what the deal with the show is yet.
Yeah. As far as like what the planet is supposed to look like, it was, the design of the show, it was always done by Matt Jeffries, the production designer. But in this specific case, he was ill and he was not available to work on this episode. And so before he left, he asked Harlan Ellison, what should this city look like? This city on the edge of forever. And Harlan, I thought that I had read that this was like in the script, but I don't think it was originally described in the script. But Harlan said in an interview that he just rattled off something to him about how it should be ancient and we should see these structures, with runes on them. And he said RUNES, like pictograms, runes. But apparently Jeffries heard ruins. Like the ruins of something, which is why we see like all these columns and stuff like that. So apparently, like when Ellison got to see the set, he's like, "What the fuck are all these columns doing here?" He said, "You said ruins." I said runes.
This is like a bit.
Yeah,
this would be in the movie.
This is in the movie. Yeah, absolutely.
It's like a good comedic bit.
Also, as I mentioned before, Jeffries was sick and not able to work on the design of the Guardian specifically. So in that case, the art director, Rowland Brooks, had to step in and design the Guardian, and he settled on this donut-shaped thing that we eventually get. Yeah, which I think is cool. I think
it's pretty iconic at this point.
Sure, yeah. I mean, you absolutely recognize that anywhere. But so they built all this stuff, and of course the runes and everything. And then Jeffries came back from being sick, and he's like, "What the hell is all this? What is this donut thing?" So if he hadn't got the stomach flu or whatever, we would have had no donut.
Yeah, it made me wonder, like in the script, there's an actual city. There's no city on the edge of forever in the episode. It's more metaphorical,
yeah,
I guess.
Ellison intended the city to be a literal city, the city on the planet, but also the city that they go to, which is in his original script, Chicago. And of course, it's just New York in the aired episode.
Darn. Yeah, I guess I was wondering if they were like, instead of some guys, it's better if it's just the donut thing, so we don't have to make a whole city. But,
yeah,
I don't know.
And that makes the Guardian itself kind of metaphorical, or at least ethereal, because there is no actual person. In the comic, they make it very explicit. We see, and this is the description I think in the original script as well, that it's between two columns there is a shimmering sort of area, and we see like these old men who, they describe themselves as being ancient, around before your sun was hot or whatever it is. But they appear as like these old sort of wizened men who are the Guardians.
Yeah, and I like they give them some kind of like almost like, it made me think of like Legend of Zelda style riddles to like solve when they go back in time. I kind of like that.
Yeah.
That was in some elements an improvement.
Link,
in other ways, not.
Look for the sun and the key on blue. Or
that
whatever.
That I didn't. I mean, I liked that, but that was not an improvement, I will say.
Yeah, that's kind of first drafty. I think that would have gotten worked out.
It made more sense that they just kind of naturally met, and they were in Edith Keeler's basement or whatever, poking around instead of that guy.
Yeah.
There's
a guy. We're just all over the map, and I guess that's the only thing we can really do. There's a guy that meets them when they arrive in the basement instead of Edith Keeler herself. And I just think that from a TV perspective, it makes a lot of sense to just make Edith Keeler the person that runs the mission that they end up in. In the teleplay, in the comic original teleplay, she's just like a street preacher. She has no, as far as I can tell, she goes to the missions, but she doesn't run the mission. And if I'm DC Fontana or I'm the story editor, I'm like, we'll just make that the same person. That way we can use our guest star.
Yes. It feels a lot more natural, and it also I feel like the episode kind of more slowly, as much as it can be, like gets you in with like Kirk and her story and like them falling in love.
Yeah.
Whereas like they meet her in the thing in the comic, and Spock right away is like, you shouldn't fall in love with her.
Don't fall in love with her.
And it doesn't actually feel very like natural or believable to me.
Yeah. Plus you have, and you would have this if Harlan's original script was produced, you've got the actor there to make those feelings, apparent. I mean, the artist Woodward is doing everything he can, but on a comic page, it doesn't come through the sort of performance that Shatner would have given to them to fall in love with her.
That's true. I did like, though, that like I like the explanation in both of these things. They kind of have the explanation that there are these important like focal points in time that they're naturally led to as well, like them, the actors going back in time. And so they naturally would kind of run into her, which makes sense then that they would just run into her in her basement or whatever. But I liked that you had in the comic, you had these guardians kind of like foretelling this to them, because it's something so big and like goofy and like almost magical that like it has some like it like is believable and has some weight behind it, that like these old like wizard dudes told them about it. Instead, in the episode, they're just like, someone once said if you went back in time, you would be drawn to this, and it felt just like more like that to me felt like that's fake, like someone just made that up. Whereas like when these like old magic dudes told it to him, I'm like, that is real. Like these guys know more than I would ever know.
Yeah. I guess that's a good point. Something else that like I'm glad that I read this original teleplay, because it made it more explicit and it confirmed something I suspected, is that in the episode, the Guardian of Forever exists. We don't really know why. And it's like, check this out, stock footage. And it just shows you all this historical scenes. Like, what's its purpose? And once they go through and they come back out and they've had like the worst time ever, like Kirk has just watched the love of his life get just flattened by a truck. The Guardian's like, want to go again? And it's like, what is its purpose? But in this, we see that the old Guardians, they literally say, we have nothing to do but desire to show you. They do kind of in their own way want to show off the wonders of the universe. And they're like, try it out. Like Beckwith goes through and they're like, yeah, cool. He tried it out. Like, do you want to try it out? They want to share this thing, and they don't, I'm not sure if they really know or care what they're offering, because they're literally offering like the chance to completely destroy themselves or, Kirk's universe in their lives. But it is for whatever reason, kind of their imperative to like, go, just go check it out. Go see some dinosaurs, do whatever you want.
Yeah. Which I think makes like, there is a story element of this of like, we got to reset time, but like, it doesn't have all the kind of like hand wringing that like you'd sort of expect like Picard to do, or like in one of those later episodes where they get really into the time travel and like what are the ramifications. Yeah. And like how we like, you just don't have them sitting around being like, oh, we can't do this, we can't do that. Yeah. It's just like,
this isn't the first Star Trek time travel story, but it is the first one. I think that really, you'll see this later in the franchise, that people wondering, like, is it right to do what we're doing? Is this the right thing to do? The ethical implications of the time travel become really real in this episode.
Yeah, I feel like it's really introduced here, but it's like, I think it still like has that element of like, it's like a little bit more like, yeah, let's go do it. I think maybe it is because the Guardians are like, yeah, come on.
It's chill.
You want to see stuff?
Do it. Yeah. Go and do it. Yeah.
So Caliban, you finally show your face. Just in time for me to blow it off.
It's fitting you chose to hide in this abandoned movie theater, Mika and Hana, because for you, the show's over.
Big talk, but soon you'll be as dead as all the well-loved celebrities we lost this year.
When I'm done, they'll be cleaning you off the walls like COVID-19.
Wait, where's your face mask?
I thought we were going to fight outside.
Oh, come on!
I mean, if the murder hornets aren't out there still.
Take this.
You want to watch HBO Max on my phone?
I'll start cooking some beans in this old boot.
Just Enough Trope. News, reviews, and apocalyptic views every Monday on the Just Enough Trope Network.
Won't the 5G kill us?
Shh.
Something that I did like in the episode better than in the comic, and it's just a function of the growing, culture of technobabble and Trek, is that in the comic or in the original teleplay, Spock just says, well, I think I can figure out like where he ended up by like tuning my tricorder to, the frequency of the portal or whatever. Mm-hmm. But in the episode, Spock is like, oh shit, I should be recording all this. This is like an amazing view into Earth history. So I'm going to use my, I'm going to film, right. I'm going to film the TV screen, with my tricorder and get all this stuff. And because he did that, he's able to like rewind and go, oh, okay, he landed in the 1930. He's able to use that information later. And then when they get there, in the original teleplay, there's a little jiggery pokery with getting information from the tricorder, but like Spock holding himself up and like trying to get information from the tricorder becomes a big part of the action.
That made it a lot better, and just like the visual of his like big machine he's making was really great.
Yeah. I need platinum, Captain. Maybe 5 or 6 pounds. There's a whole. So the first issue is basically like the first act, and they don't even go back in time until the second issue. But it sets everything up for you. And there's a thing in there that apparently Harlan was not forced, but suggested by Roddenberry to write, which is something that you would. I'm not sure I believe that. It's fantastical, and you would totally cut it out of a TV script, but.
Okay.
The crew attempts to beam back to the Enterprise, and they realize that the Enterprise is not there. It is a ship called the Condor, and it is a pirate ship, and they get into a pitched battle with a bunch of pirates.
Yeah.
And Yeoman Rand is going ham on some of these pirates with a phaser gun.
That was kind of sick. It was another, like, the other stuff where it was like, okay, it feels like a little bit superfluous to the episode, but, like, it's just, to me, it was another cool, like, little bit that I liked, because it just felt it felt very different, Actually, it felt a little bit like Mirror Mirror, I guess, which,
okay,
where it's like, what if it's our world, but, like, people don't, it's just like the ship, it's not acting like you expect a Star Trek crew to act, they're pirates or whatever,
right.
Yeah. So that I liked that's the case of like I like seeing those darker tones, and I actually think Mirror Mirror does that a lot better though, because it's like the focus of the episode.
And it sets up something of a ticking clock, but again, it doesn't have any real effect on the episode, because the idea is that they are able to escape to the transporter room and take control of it. And Rand and the other crew members that are there have to hold this room while they beam Kirk and Spock back down to talk to the Guardian. And so we get the idea that they are, they're burning through the doors and quick, go, Captain, we'll be okay. And then they go back in time, but they're already back in time. So is it like Bill and Ted? Is the clock still running, in the Star Trek present? And we never really addressed that. In fact, we never even returned to that. We returned to that once. And I'm not sure if we're seeing that or Kirk is just imagining them being overrun in the transporter room. It's just never really. It's another kind of dead end.
I think it is enough to me that it's like the ship is gone.
Oh, so we leave,
like in the episode, yeah.
And so not only do we need to restore all of time, but Rand and our crewmen are dead, and they won't come back unless we fix this.
I think it like establishes stakes, I guess, but we know the stakes enough that it's like,
well, the stakes are all of reality, like as we know it, but
yeah, exactly. So I don't think we need to go back to the Condor or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it was fun.
Kirk and Spock get back to the Guardian in the teleplay, and they have a talk with the Guardian about like Beckwith and why he's doing this, and the Guardian, as detached as it is, still has an idea of the morality of the situation, because basically they throw Beckwith under the bus. The Guardian's like, "Do you know the concept of evil?" And they're like, "Well, yeah," and it's like, This is a creature that is just evil. They'll just do bad stuff. And you're like, okay, well, that's not good.
Okay, I guess sure.
So he's the bad guy. They go through the time portal and end up in both stories back in 1930. In this case, in New York, and immediately they are confronted with the kind of perils that you might run into in 1930s New York. There's a guy, of course, we're in the Depression at this point. There's a guy talking about how it's the fault of the foreigners and the Chinamen and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that actually worked, I think, a little bit better than like Kirk just cracking a joke about it.
And stealing some clothes and, running into the cop and yeah.
I actually like that. It kind of
It's a little more pointed.
Yeah, than Spock just being like, in both of them, he's like a little too upset about it in the comic, honestly.
Yeah.
But it made more like it worked a lot better than like Kirk being like, "Oh yeah, my friend, he's Chinese."
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
And it's played like a bit, and no one really cares.
That's what Harlan's script completely lacks the sort of humor that would characterize the original series, and I think a lot of Star Trek going forward. But what they replaced his thing with is just way too much. Yeah, the rice picking machine.
Yeah, right.
But their conversation is a rough one because Spock's like, when he sees this, he's like, oh, this is the heritage that you're proud of? Like this is horrible.
That's
and
fair.
Once they get to the basement, to the cellar, they have like a real fight. In the episode, it's changed so that it's sort of a teasing kind of thing between them, but he's really upset about the situation. And we learned a little bit about Harlan's view of Vulcan. This wouldn't be what would end up being the history of Vulcan in the series, but how it doesn't sound like they ever had a period where they were, savage and feral. They were always sort of refined and emotionless, and humanity beat them to the stars. It was humanity, I guess, that discovered Vulcan in this universe.
Yeah. So he maybe has it more of like the instinct for like war or like stuff like that was like what pushed technological innovation or something.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah. They were more aesthetic. Okay.
Yeah, I like the. Yeah, like I said, I like the confrontation there. Maybe it's just like the original series Spock that I kind of expect would just be kind of like he would mention it, but he just seemed really shook, and I was like, I don't expect Spock to get so shook about this, I think he would just like trash Kirk and be like, all right, anyway, let's do the mission,
Yeah, right. Yeah, there's there is, I don't mean to say that it's all fun and games. Like there is a real feeling of sort of bummerness and dread in the televised episode that of course culminates with a controversial profanity for the time where Kirk's just like, let's get the hell out of here. And they beam away.
No kidding.
Yeah, that was a big thing with the censors because you could refer to hell. They'd gotten away with that before in other episodes, but using like the sort of expletive, let's get the hell out of here that was a problem.
That's incredible. Wow. I didn't even notice like or feel anything when he said that in this really, other than like he's upset.
Yeah, that was meant to punctuate his upsetness. But I liked early on when they try to contact the Enterprise and she's gone and they're like, we're totally alone. And it pans up to like the empty stars. I think that's the only kind of shot that I've ever seen on the early Trek.
That's very cool.
And when they're thinking about like, okay, we think we know the time, we got to go in. We don't know if this is going to work. Oh yeah, Scotty, Uhura, if we don't come back, you guys have to do this too. Each one of you in your own turn has to try to do what we're doing. And the effect is, even if you fail, at least you'll be in some universe where hopefully you can find happiness. And I'm like, is that there's no temporal prime directive, but won't they fuck time up more? Like if they go back and like, stop Napoleon from being defeated at Waterloo or something like that.
I know. Okay, I know you don't like what if stories, but
well, this is kind of one.
That's true. But I like the idea of like a what if story about like Scotty and Uhura like trying to live like just off the grid enough so they aren't influencing time. You know what I mean? Like,
there's got to be a novel that tackles that.
Oh, that would be that actually is a great idea. And they get like wrapped up in something, and they're like, "Oh, do we do this or do we not
right
type thing. Yeah.
We know that Genghis Khan is going to take over. Yeah, right.
Like, oh, yeah, snap. We've been back to like the Middle Ages.
Yeah. This, of course, they return to this idea with All Our Yesterdays, where they find a planet that their sun is going to go supernova. And to escape that, they just send their entire population into their own past. And it's like Star Trek, it's the 60s and it's an hour show. So they're really not going to like explore the effects of that. But I think that idea is really fascinating, the idea of a civilization sort of cannibalizing its own past to save itself. And that's kind of what happens in Tenet. Although I'm not going to talk about Tenet again on the show.
No. They should do a backwards episode.
Maybe they will. Maybe Discovery will try that out.
We can do an episode. Yep. Okay.
All right, we're looking forward to that, or looking backward. I can't tell. So yeah, in the teleplay, they're now safely ensconced in the past. They've got the clothes and everything, and they're working for money, and they're trying to unravel this clue that they get from the tricorder before it dies about the burning sun and blue and the key, and it plays out fairly similar. There's actually a little bit of like, I don't know, I'm going to punch this up a little bit. It gets kind of paunchy because they just kind of wander around for a while. There's a good scene where Spock is working for the money and the guy tries to cheat him, and Spock just goes after the guy. He's like, actually, you owe me $7.50. I've, at this many hours for this amount of money. And the guy's like, geez, okay, sorry.
It was like kind of like slice of life-y. Like you just got to see like Spock kind of deal with like racism and stuff like that. I kind of like that. Yeah,
it's of course it's racism because he's I guess he's pretending to be Chinese, but still it's him seeing like
right
this, the history of humanity that he's been told was so great is not so great after all. And then we also get, and I think this is kind of tough to show if you're not going to deviate from Harlan's script. We see that Kirk is maybe settling in here. Spock at one point says that he's always suspected it would be easiest to go native on your own world. That maybe Kirk is thinking, even if we don't get out of this, it wouldn't be so bad to live in America at this time, depression aside.
Yeah, I think they hint at that a little bit in episode 2. It's a cool concept, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, it felt like he sets that up, and then he kind of mentions, like I said, the Edith Keeler thing, I think, really quickly. That kind of like, I feel like it kind of jumps the gun a little bit. Like I like it more when you kind of see Kirk getting more used to going on the dates and stuff, and like that being really the big thing.
Yeah. Yeah, they discover Edith. They figure out that the riddle is referring to her, essentially her blue cowl or cloak and her sun brooch, and then also her name being Keeler, part key.
Right. Okay.
Which is like, yeah, okay, that's a sixth grade D&D thing. But that all works, and then Kirk tries to get closer to Edith. She pegs that he's from Iowa, but I think this is a retcon. This is maybe from Tipton, because of course Iowa was nowhere in Kirk's backstory when Ellison would have written the script. But it's a nice little addition here.
Yeah, Iowa accent.
I found out that, so of course in Star Trek 4 he says that, he's from Iowa. He only works in outer space. And I didn't know this, but it was actually Riverside, Iowa that came up with the Iowa thing first. I've been to Trek Fest in Riverside, Iowa, but it was in 1985 when they first came up with the idea for Trek Fest, and they literally just, I guess I don't know the whole backstory, but the guy that started it was just a Trek fan, and they were looking for some festival, something to get tourists and attention to their town, and they just came up with this idea that Kirk would have been born there. And so the line in Star Trek 6 actually came after as a sort of homage or a reference to that decision.
Wow, that's never... I guess I never even thought about when it's first referenced.
Yeah.
It's just something I've always known. Well, that's great. I'd like to think... I think if there is an Iowa accent, that's probably what I have.
I've lived above Iowa for my entire life, and I don't think I could tell you what the Iowa accent is.
Yeah. I think there's just like a bland Midwest accent.
Sure. Yeah.
That no one can describe.
I guess you could peg Chicago. I guess you could peg what you'd think of as like the Fargo accent. But like, yeah, what's the Iowa accent?
I don't know. I grew up, on the river, on the Mississippi.
Sure.
And I could see Iowa from my house. And I had their accents. I could never nail them down. So I just assume, since they sound the same as me, that I have an Iowa accent.
Okay. Well, there you go. You can peg
What a
that
weird
Iowa accent
thing.
from a mile away.
Maybe in the 30s it was more noticeable.
Sure. Hey, you don't talk like this. You must be from Iowa.
Hey, Buster.
The story goes on pretty much the same. Of course, there was no McCoy in the teleplay. I think that the McCoy, as we've discussed, I think the McCoy bit is a great fix. Not only does it get one of our principals back in the story and makes it more concentrated on our crew, but it's also a complication. You know, Spock and Kirk settle into this life where, at least in the TV episode, Spock is going to work on his transistors or whatever, or his vacuum tubes, and Kirk is going to buy French bread, and they're going to work until they can find the answer, and then that's when McCoy shows up. You know, the new complication. And of course, there's the great scene where McCoy shows up and his assassins. Hey, who are you? And we see the guy.
I'm not going to kill you.
Yeah, I'm not going to kill you. They're going to kill you. And we see the guy, Rodent, who Kirk and Spock met originally at the mission, when there's that great exchange where he's like, oh, she's going to give us the gloom and doom. You know, the sermon comes now, although I wouldn't mind a little bit of, and Kirk's like, shut up. We don't want any of that.
Yeah, see that, and Spock, and like he looks at Spock and he's like, I want to hear what she has to say. And like, to me, that maybe it's just, again, like what you're saying about you have kind of their performances to sell it, but that's, I feel like, a good way of establishing Spock being like, why are you so worried about this person? Yeah.
And it's a little more explicit in the TV version as well. The idea that maybe it's a little too on the nose, but she's a visionary. You know, she wants peace and she sees this, you know, space-bound future for humanity. And I guess I can't remember specifically what it was in the comic. I guess she's just also kind of positive on humanity's future, but we don't get the explicit idea that, like, no, her movement will grow and she'll talk to FDR and she'll keep him out of the war. And you know, that,
I think
that
they
comes
just
in
say,
much,
like, what if?
Yeah, that comes in as a suggestion much later in the teleplay version.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But the conflict is much clearer in the episode. You know, we've of course got the iconic Edith Keeler must die. Yeah,
it's a little goofy, but I think it works. Like this, the episode's a real journey. So I like all the different things that are wrapped up in it, and even if some of them I'm like, that's a little wacky, but I'll take it.
In both versions, Spock becomes almost a disapproving sort of presence. You know, as Kirk gets closer to Edith. I think it's done a little in the episode. I think it's done more effectively in the comic, that he's sort of in the background of all these shots, kind of, you know, watching and judging. Whereas in the episode, we just get the one exchange when Edith almost falls down the stairs and Spock's there seeing it. And then later he's like, you know, Captain, that would have been it right there. If you just went whoops and then she just fell down the stairs, we'd be done. But of course, Kirk points out, you know, we don't know that this is it. Like, where's McCoy? If he's affects it, he's not here. And in the comic, there's a scene that I think is not totally complete without the performance of the actors. Kirk and Edith are going to like a music bar, a dance hall, and they go down some stairs, and she falls down the stairs and hits the bottom, and she's okay. But the whole time, Kirk's face is just sort of like, oh no, like it's just kind of blank. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be reading from his face.
Oh, okay. I just felt like that accident. I reread this before I rewatched the episode, and I remember her falling, and for some reason, like the injury is just, or it's like a real fall. So I just felt like it felt way more intense. Because it's like, oh, that is like scary. Like I just imagined, it wasn't where like Kirk almost stopped her. I just imagine like you kind of knowing this person is supposed to die soon, and then thinking like maybe you just witnessed it.
Yeah, or also him getting comfy, dating her and living this life with her, and then being reminded of his grim task here.
Yeah, it works the same kind of in the episode, and probably better, I feel like, because it is the actors and stuff. Like that scene works a little bit better, but it feels so much more serious or like scary, I think, as like a fake out or something in the comic, because it seems like, oh, she might have just died there.
Yeah. Whereas in the episode, it's like, oh boy, I almost fell.
It's like it's like a slight reminder.
Yeah. As the teleplay continues, of course, we hit the point where Beckwith does appear in the past, and Kirk and Spock try to chase him down. There's a character that gets introduced, I think, in issue 4 of the Apple Seller, whose nickname is Trooper, whose visual appearance is based on Harlan Ellison, an older Harlan Ellison. And he, I'm not sure about his role in this. He provides them information about where Beckwith might be. Later on, he will sacrifice his life to save Kirk when Beckwith takes a phaser shot at him, and he gets totally vaporized. And then later on, when the story closes, he becomes kind of another element in this, kind of a foil for Keeler. They're exploring the idea that Keeler is important, but I guess this guy wasn't important, and he fought in World War I, and he was, he should have been important, but I guess he just didn't matter to time. And I'm not exactly sure what they're going for.
I wasn't sure about that either. I was like, that's an interesting concept, but it was maybe one of those other ones where I was like, this isn't really the point of the story. So
yeah,
maybe if there was an alternate story where that was explored, like that could be interesting.
Yeah,
I feel like you got like, I don't know, that I was thinking about in the episode they have a casualty also, but they don't even comment on it at all. So that's even weirder. I think.
I guess
it's a crazy scene. I'm like, oh, that's messed up.
Yeah,
but
and bringing him in relatively late in the story, I think hurts his importance. Like, I guess I don't know how he would just be wandering around the entire time, but I guess I kind of like the idea that this quote unquote cripple was unimportant to the Guardians or to time, but he ended up being incredibly important, because if Kirk gets vaporized, this is all for naught anyway. He is instrumental in Kirk setting time back the way it was. So I guess it just gives you an idea of there are multiple perspectives to this, because as far as the universe is concerned, or the people on the Condor are concerned, this doesn't matter at all. Resetting time is what it is. And I think that's the Guardians' kind of viewpoint. But for Kirk's mission and restoring time to the way it was, this guy was indispensable.
Oh, I get you. Yeah, and I guess that kind of works, like, especially with the attitude the Guardian has of, like, I don't care, Yeah,
just, right.
Like,
yeah.
Go check it out if you want.
I guess that's evil, your idea of evil. So we get to the final climax, and it's a lot different in this case.
Oh, yeah. Oh, with that scene, there's one thing I wanted to mention was... Sure. With adding McCoy in, it also has like one of my favorite scenes of the episode when he's like getting really upset about like the hospital.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
I just really like that.
Yeah.
It's like a good like character. It like makes you wonder like what, it just, I don't know. It makes you think about like what his deal is, I guess, because he's a doctor, but he's afraid of like, I guess, this more ancient medicine, I guess.
Yeah.
Or like the way of doing things,
the
how
modern
violent it is.
Museum perfection, because he's trying to figure out if they don't have holodecks, but like, what is this recreation? And, biped, good cranial size. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he starts going on about like scalpels and stuff like that.
Cutting and sewing people like garments. Yeah.
And I love that. And it makes me think of, I also like in Star Trek 4 where he's like, they go to the hospital and like,
oh my God, man, this is the Dark Ages.
That really feels like a payoff of this, of like, him being like a doctor, but really afraid of like kind of ancient medicine and stuff.
Yeah. Memory Alpha loves to point out that, in both this and Star Trek IV, Kirk, the second he gets back in time, almost gets hit by a car. It's not quite so funny when in Star Trek IV, he almost gets hit by a car. Does he think about Edith Keeler at all? Or no, it's just double dumbass on you.
You ever think he's like, maybe if I could pop back to like 1928.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. keep the bird of prey going a little while longer. Yeah. That's great. DeForest Kelly's great as always in this. He looks like hammered shit. But
the little scenes where he's like healing and like talking to her also really sweet.
Yeah.
So I had to mention it.
And waiting to show him, bringing him in at let's say the start of the third act, he has to, in order for the climax of the TV episode to be resonant, he has to very quickly grow close to her. And I think they do that very well in several short scenes, so that when later on at the end of the TV episode, when Kirk, stops him from saving her, fulfilling his mission, he's like, "What the hell? Why did you do that? Do you know what you did?" And of course, Spock says, "He knows, Doctor. He knows." We don't have that in the comic.
Yeah.
and this is, I think, one thing that a lot of people who don't prefer Ellison's version of the story take the issue with is that so you ready? Here we go. Beckwith tries to save her. Why would Beckwith try to save her? They deal with this later in the story when he's talking to Spock and basically asks the same question, and they bring up the spark of impossible human godliness that even for a terrible person like him in that moment, he was like, I don't want this innocent to get hurt. I don't know about that. I think that kind of goes against the entire story so far. Instead, Spock basically, stops him. So why is Spock involved if it's Kirk's romance? And why would Kirk do nothing? He just stands there and does nothing. I get that Ellison's intent was that Kirk, a man of action in this moment where the entire universe is at stake, is paralyzed because of the decision and because of his love for her. But that's a weak look for the captain of the Enterprise going forward.
Yeah, that's true, but I kind of like it as like a big like character flaw type moment where he couldn't make that choice, But I guess that's for that type of show, not something they would keep. Like that's not something they're like, oh, we'll get into this more,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I like that conceptually, but yeah, it was just with Beckwith as a character. It just, he didn't feel integral to this. I feel like the Ellison story is a bit more like, it has a lot of like interesting concepts and stuff like that, but it just doesn't feel tailor-made for like a satisfying episode of this TV show, Maybe if it's something more long form or something where you're like exploring all these elements, or even kind of works okay in the comic. But if it was like I don't know, something longer or something, like a novel or something where you're kind of touching on a lot of different things.
Yeah.
But I feel like everything in the episode, save for a few things, feel all geared more towards that final moment with Kirk stopping McCoy. And so it feels a lot more impactful because everything is kind of pointed towards that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about it being more novel-like, or when I say not Star Trek, I don't mean we don't need this at all, but not fitted for the series Star Trek, because there is a lot of philosophizing and kind of navel-gazing, and to have Kirk to be thinking about these big decisions and these big matters, I think is great, but having him being paralyzed by them is not very Star Trek. He needs to, a Starfleet captain needs to do something. And very often, even Picard will do something. He will worry about something. He will toss over the possibility in his mind. But at the end of the day, you have to do something. And having him do nothing is not, maybe for one episode that's okay. But going forward for this young series, we need a captain who is going to act first and then eat his heart out later.
Yeah. It works. I'm not opposed to it.
Yeah.
But and I think it does work more in the episode that he does make the decision, because then it's more about how he had to do it, and he has to kind of live with himself or whatever.
Yeah.
As opposed to, like, damn, that sucks.
Yeah. My instructors in Starfleet told me there'd be days like this.
Yeah, right. So it makes more sense too for, like, what the point of, like, presenting a captain would be is them having to deal with stuff they did, you know?
Yeah. They get back eventually. Well, I mean, after they solve the problem, they return. As you mentioned before, Beckwith immediately runs back into the Guardian of Forever, which is like, guys, hold on to that guy. And then, apparently that's not okay. The rules are one ride only. And so he is sent to the heart of a exploding sun or something like that forever. Which is like, wow, the guy tried to help a lady. Like, there's no reprieve. There's no stay of sentence. This guy just, will be on fire forever.
Yeah. Everything else points towards he's pure evil. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the scene of him, like, in that spiral is sick. Like, that's cool.
That is. Yeah. It's a great illustration. Yeah.
And I do like when Star Trek kind of gets out of its comfort zone a little bit. So, like, seeing this Star Trek again with, like, just some of these darker elements in the start of very, like, tangible looking Star Trek world was kind of cool. But again, I think I would need to see more on that as opposed to it being, like, random scenes that I was like, oh, sweet.
Yeah, and then the series ends, and the miniseries ends, and Kirk and Spock are discussing what's happened. Kirk is still thinking about Keeler and whether or not it was necessary for her to die. And like I said before, we never really find out why she was important. We never really find out how she was the focus point, which I think is a little weird and possibly...
Well, we're just told by the Guardians.
Yeah, right.
Right.
And then, of course, we have the discussion about the variable nature of humanity, being able to be good and evil at the same time. And of course, we're left with the idea that no matter what, her value was, no woman was offered the universe for love.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is all well and good on the page, I suppose. I still like what they came up with in the episode more.
Yeah, I think it's... Yeah, I feel like some of the things in the page, maybe it's just a thing where it's like, I'd have to see it adapted or something, like this isn't necessarily crafted either. I don't get the picture that this is, like, crafted to be like
to satisfy like a Star Trek episode would.
To that, or like a comic, you know what I mean? Like, because I feel like it has a little bit of both. It goes a little both ways, because it's like it's got some unique things in it, some cool pages, but then other times it is like, oh yeah, it just, like, looks like, the actor. Like, I think that the art is good, but it's like, oh, it just looks like William Shatner. It looks like the bridge, and I liked seeing it in those settings. It made it feel authentic. Yeah. But to me, then it just didn't overall feel like geared towards being like the greatest comic or like the best TV episode either. It felt more like it felt like the most impressive version of, like, if you ever watch, like, the, like, early prints of, like, movies, like, before it's done. That's kind of what it felt like.
Okay.
Like, I used to have a laser disc of Beauty and the Beast that they showed at some festivals before it was done, and there was just some scenes that weren't done.
Okay,
and
yeah.
This is like a completed version of that, where it's like, you want to check out what his script was like visually, like, here you go, But, like, I guess what I'm saying is, like, I would like to see, like, what his director's cut of the actual episode was. Like, where's the Ellison cut on HBO Max? Give him all the money in the world to recreate
Release the
episode.
Ellison cut, yeah.
Maybe I'm off on that, but it just, it felt like there was some stuff that just didn't land. And I think you saying, like, mentioning the performances, like, that was the key to me of being like, oh, okay, that's why.
Yeah, I think what I learned from all this is that Star Trek stories, like they have to be an hour long.
Yeah.
And that's what a Star Trek story is. And I think even you see this in some of the Star Trek movies suffer from being longer than an hour. Like they have 5 acts or 4 to 5 act structure, and they pose a question and they wrestle with that question, and that question is answered, sometimes not in a satisfying way. And that's a Star Trek story. And I think that we, like I said, the movies sometimes suffer. I think that we are running up against that idea now with the new Star Trek shows that, are merely a 10-hour movie that's chopped up into 1 hours. I think that this suffers from that because and they tried to structure, I mean, there's 5 issues. They tried to kind of structure it like, a Star Trek hour-long episode, but Star Trek tales are told in an hour. And Ellison ran against that when he wrote like this sweeping, epic movie length script for an episode. I think that the themes, the pacing of Ellison's effort suffers in comparison to something that is polished, for an hour. There are definitely parts of the televised City on the Edge of Forever that I would like to see expanded. There are parts that are expanded. When the guy vaporizes himself that you see in the Netflix, that's like the DVD cut. That was in the original broadcast, and they cut that part out for all rebroadcasts. So if you, just found Star Trek on TV in the 80s and they were showing City on the Edge of Forever, you wouldn't see that. That was restored to DVD versions. Cool. So yeah, there are, you can extend the story, but what happens when you do? What are you losing from what was crafted by all these people who are very good at crafting these things?
I already kind of said this, but I think what an interesting episode could have been was if they were like, you're not happy with this? Well, all right, how about this? We'll use your script, but you got to direct the episode. And you got to make it an hour long. And I would have loved to see what. And
you got to balance the budget. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because I think there are interesting ideas in his, and I would just wonder what he would have deemed worthy of keeping in to fit in the hour long structure.
Well, I think that he's able to do that. When he worked on The Outer Limits, he wrote this episode called "The Demon with a Glass Hand." It starred Robert Culp, and it won him awards. And he initially wrote that it was happening all over L.A. He wanted all these location shoots and set pieces in different parts of L.A. And I think Bob Justman was working on the show at the time, and they had the same problem. He wrote an episode that couldn't be filmed. It would cost $10 million to film. But he took Ellison to the Bradbury Building, the famous building in L.A., and said, look, I know you don't want to be cut, you don't want to be edited, but what if I show you that we can do one scene here, and you can get this, and then we go up a floor and we do this and we do this, and as we rise through the building, you could place all these scenes in different areas until we get to the roof of the building. And Ellison was like, that's a great idea, let me get back to the typewriter. And he rewrote it for that, taking place in just one area instead of all these different areas. So I think that he understood that. I just don't know if it was his own personal pride as a creator or if Roddenberry was a total jerk about it, but he just wasn't interested in having his effort modified, for the show. And I wonder, when I think about his wins for the script, do you think that people were awarding him those awards for his effort for the script or for the final product, which they saw? Do you know what I mean? If we looked back at the other 4 Trek episodes that were nominated and we read their scripts, their original teleplays, would they match up in the same way as Ellison's teleplay did for City? I'm not saying it's not, a phenomenon. It's great, but I wonder if he's kind of getting that award and he's yelling at the people who helped him get that award because that episode was so well received.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, this is interesting. I like this internal struggle, artistic struggle. I always think it's very interesting.
Yeah.
When you see like these creative kind of visions butt heads, and like with the aspects of reality and what can be done and who thinks what's a good idea. And like, this is kind of off topic, but I guess we sort of saw people like interpreting things with like the Justice League cut of like just like trying to. There's always like this where people are trying to interpret like what person put what into this.
Maybe it takes a producer or an editor to tell Zack Snyder, you can't have slow motion Leonard Cohen songs in every single sequence. That's not going to work.
Not just that, but like I just mean like you saw people like when the original came out, you saw people kind of interpreting like what was Snyder's vision, what was the other guy, Joss Whedon, and sometimes people were right, sometimes people were way off base. And I always think that's so fascinating, like when you can actually kind of know. I've heard other like with music. I know there's certain bands or like acts that are made up of people who are known for their other work, and I've seen people like that say like sometimes their music is misinterpreted as like who contributed what to what song because they're known for this thing. And so I always find that fascinating. I always have a hard time like coming down hard on a specific thing unless I really know, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I definitely would say that, like, I would definitely say that award was given because they saw the episode and it's a great episode.
Yeah.
And it's clear to me that like he doesn't understand that a lot of people thought it was great as it was. But I also am hesitant to like discount him too,
Yeah.
And like what he was, and that's why we got to see the movie.
Yes.
To tell us what really happened.
Release the Ellison cut. Yes.
And we'll never know really what exactly happened.
I wonder if you could do it and change all the names, or if you could do a fan production, and and obviously it wouldn't be a motion picture quality, but. And just use all the names, but you don't charge anything. So Paramount can't sue you, or just,
right,
or maybe,
or just rights to Harlan Ellison.
Yeah, or just write a book. Write like a book version of it.
A book version that becomes so beloved
they have to make it into a movie.
That they adapt it.
Sure.
And if they change it, people will be pissed.
People will know. Yeah, and then you'll start the conversation all over again.
Here we go.
Yeah, I love it. Well, even Harlan Ellison would admit that technology is what makes Trek Trek. It sometimes facilitates what the characters are doing. Just as often, it's the complication that they're dealing with. So on every show, we randomly pick from a list of Star Trek technologies, and we add what we get to the non-Trek media and subtract it from the Trek episode to see how each will be different. It's our technological exchange, and I think we could pull this off. Here's what we'll do. We will remove this piece of technology from the Trek environs, and we will apply it to the milieu of 1930s New York and see what we get.
Okay, that's fun, yeah.
Here's our list of technology. It's phasers, holodecks, tricorders, transporters, warp drive, replicators, communicators, shields, advanced medical technology, and androids. And if I roll on my randomly selecting device, I get the number 7. It's communicators. If communicators didn't exist in the world of Star Trek, the original series, either Harlan Ellison's world or the televised world, how would it be different?
Oh, okay. So we're taking them out of that, but then when they go back in time, there is communicators?
Yes.
Is that what we're saying?
Yeah.
Whoa.
More or less.
Oh my God.
And I think we can cheat. I mean, if we can't think of anything really with
you can't talk to the ship.
Yeah. If we can't think of anything with the comic, it's okay. We can use the show.
Here's what it is. They go down there and they're like, okay, we'll come back and we'll tell you what is happening on this planet. But they go through and let's say Scotty and her are like, I know they only waited a second, but they're like, oh, they're not back. And they jump through and then they're on the ship and they're like, what happened? And I'm like, well, let's send down Sulu and Chekhov. And so they go down.
Eventually, the entire crew goes through the Guardian of Forever.
Yeah. And they all move. They all get comfortable, and they all move to New York. and they serve in World War II. And
you've got a line of 450 people all waiting to either push Edith Keeler under a bus or save her. They're all drawn. They're all
like
drawn.
A parade. They're lined up along the side of the road.
They eventually become the parade that crushes Edith Keeler on the street.
It's like Captain America: Civil War, where there's like Team Keeler and Team Save
Yes.
Keeler Must Die or something.
All drawn by the currents of time to New York. Yes.
Yeah, they have an epic battle over who kills her and who doesn't. I like the idea that all of them enlist and they win World War II.
Sure.
So Edith Keeler's death doesn't matter.
With their phasers and their tricorders, yeah.
Yeah, they bring back all the tech, but then they significantly alter history.
I always wonder what you would do if you couldn't communicate faster than light. Like, let's say, we accept that they develop a warp drive that allows a ship to go faster than light, but they're also sending signals, faster than light, and it's all explained through subspace. But if you could only travel, then you'd have like the Pony Express. You'd have
that would be cool. Space Pony Express.
Sure,
yeah.
You'd have horse travel, no telegraphs. At the very beginning of the episode, and they do this sometimes whenever the episode starts and the Enterprise is in trouble. They sometimes release like a log buoy. They basically dump the entire log into a buoy that won't be destroyed with the ship, like the black box. So if somebody finds it, they can go, oh, this is the last log entry. This is what happened. At the beginning of this episode, Kirk does say to Uhura, before we go into this, broadcast my log, to Starfleet Command. So if we don't come back from this, they know what happened. But you wouldn't have that. I guess everything would be a log buoy in that situation.
Just like space littered with log buoys.
Yeah, of like my final will and testament. Yeah.
They're just leaving breadcrumbs around to figure out where they are, what they did.
So their whole universe would be very complicated because you could send some, and it would just be like on old Earth. Like you could send your army out. Yes, we're going to go fight, Caesar at Philippi. But we're not going to know what happens until somebody comes back, and the messenger will either be smiling or he'll be bloody.
Yeah, or they could go back in time, leave the communication they want them to see, like Bill and Ted, where they're like, remember a trash can. But instead they go back in time and they're like, all right, we got to put this message on Starfleet headquarters desk. And it's not going to exist for 100, 200 years, but just have it ready for them.
There is a lot of extended media, of course, around this episode. And in one of the stories, Kirk and Spock don't never find McCoy, or they never go back. And so McCoy ends up living in that time, and he puts ads in the paper. He tries to find ways to contact the future. Like he figures, if I can leave some kind of record that I was here,
whoa, that's cool.
Somebody in the future will find it, and come back. But nobody ever comes back. So he figures oh, it just must not have worked. And I think the reason it doesn't work is because he saves Edith Keeler, and there is nobody in the future to come back. Yeah, I mean,
that's awesome.
I'm softening a little on my hatred of alternate universes. That stuff's pretty cool. So if
that could exist in the episode too, it'd just be a longer episode.
Yeah, he doesn't even care about
the McCoy cut.
Yeah. Yeah, she gives him the paper, and he's like, I don't really want the paper, but yeah, maybe he's like, classified ads, eh? So if Edith Keeler can radio up the mission and tell him that she'll be there in 5 minutes because she's got communicators, how is the world of 1930s New York, or the world of 1930 different?
Well, I was gonna say it's one of those things. Now, this is maybe too serious right now, but how there's been so many things over recent years, currently with what's going on in Palestine or what any other places where now these awful things that are occurring are so much more easily documented. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because of everyone has a phone, everyone has a camera, and access to the internet. So I guess I mean, not that there were people at this time who knew about what was going on in Germany and didn't do anything.
Jeez.
Didn't care, but I
God. So you took this little suggestion about like what would Edith Keeler do with a flip phone, and you're like, there would be documenting the Dachau and Auschwitz. Like everybody would know what's going on.
I was like worried to go there,
but I mean,
it seems reasonable, right?
I mean, Spock kind of invents the internet in this episode, right? Like he somehow taps his vacuum tubes into his tricorder and invents a way to read the newspaper on a TV. Like that's basically
that's the internet.
That's what the internet is.
Star Trek knew the internet could be a thing.
Yeah, the future internet. Yeah. Oh, geez. Yeah,
I think Edith Keeler wouldn't be necessary.
Huh. Oh yeah. No matter what she says to FDR, he's like, no, we gotta go to join this war here.
It would be one of those things though, where it'd be like the article today where it's like FDR told Adolf, like, I can only put up with this for so much longer. People are getting pissed.
Maybe they wouldn't have gone out to see the Clark Gable movie because there would be an old-timey version of Netflix that they could just beam the movie in.
There'd be like,
so she's never
Calypso.
She's never in the street in the first place.
Yeah, they're seeing some weird like diorama version of it, like in that Calypso
scratchy
short track.
Black and white version of It Happened One Night. Yeah. I still like you think this is about Edith Keeler? This is about concentration camps.
I was thinking of the big picture.
Sure.
The episode is about changing history, and then we're introducing this third element of like, how would this alter history? And it's like, I naturally went to she was the focal point, I guess.
Yeah. Well, what is it about, do you think? I mean, it's kind of late to ask, but do you think it's an anti-war message or a pro-war message? Because somebody asked, I think Bob Justman, about if it was supposed to be like, did you know that the sort of anti-war elements were there when you were doing this in the 60s? And he's like, yeah, fuck yeah, of course we did. But I would almost argue that Trek vacillates greatly. And of course it took place, Trek was being created at a time when the Vietnam War was really heating up. And there were different ideas about it. And sometimes Trek will totally be anti-war. We got to stop this war. And other times, Kirk is handing out guns to the natives, to keep the war going. So,
because I think the reality of the story or whatever is certainly more complicated than pro-war, anti-war. Because I think you watch it and it's reasonable to assume like Hitler needed to be destroyed and stopped.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can also see how then someone could make like propaganda out of that, or like you've even just seen it like, it's just like a nice little thing for like the US to like hold on to as like a nice thing we've done ever, It's interesting to see the show argue against its own ideals because we don't see that she's an annoying peacenik or something like that. She might become that in the future, but she is in the embodiment, really, in both the comic and the TV show, of the Federation's ideals. Like she believes that that all men will get together, but specifically, advancements in technology will allow all men and women to come together. And Spock's literally like, the bitch has got to go. Like she's right, but she's wrong right now. And if I was giving the show credit, I would say that it is a more nuanced take. I don't know if that is totally their intention or whatever.
It's kind of having it both ways, but I think it works.
Yeah, it's actually it is kind of crazy. We didn't discuss that before because that's like, I think for a lot of people that is sort of the takeaway of the episode.
Yeah.
But then watching it this time, I was like, oh, this is a romp, and it's a love story, and it's really not about would peace have worked against Hitler like that? I don't know. That's not what it's about,
Nah, not really. But it is about.
But it is
many things, though. Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard not to think about that. Obviously.
All right. Well, anyway, she's got a flip phone. Should we tell people?
It's an N-Gage, and she can play games on it.
Yeah, right. She's got the N-Gage. I was watching Rebel in the Bronx the other day, and the kid has I think he's got a Sega Game Gear, or maybe it's an Atari Lynx. I can't remember, but it's one of the two. Should we tell people what's coming up on? It's so important. Should we tell people what's coming up on the next episode of BackTrekking?
Okay, we're going back to the Western game,
Yeehaw.
which is exciting. Yeehaw! And we're talking about Rio Grande, and how it relates to the DS9 episode "Sons and Daughters,"
which it apparently does.
Yeah, I honestly don't know, but
this is one of those sight unseen ones, because sometimes we consume Trek and other media and we make our own connections, but this is prefab backtracking idea, because supposedly that episode is specifically based on the 1950 movie, John Wayne movie Rio Grande. I
like sometimes when we do that, because it's like we're holding their feet to the fire.
Yeah, and we're coming in with no assumptions here.
Yeah. They like the John Wayne movies, so.
Yeah, they certainly do. Speaking of war versus anti-war, but we'll get into that next week. But that's it for this week's episode of BackTrekking. Thanks for listening, and if you like the show, tell a friend. You can follow us at BackTrekking on Twitter, and also tell us what you think that we should look at in future episodes. Gooey, tell the people where they can find you online.
You can find me. I'm on Twitter at Gooey Fame.
And I'm at K-A-1-I-B-A-N on Twitter. You can find all the programs on the Just Enough Trope Network at Just Enough Trope on Twitter. And that's it for us. We will see you soon. And until then, keep on trekking.
Hello, I'm Mikan Hana.
And I'm Caliban.
I'm a huge Sailor Moon fan. I've been a Moonie since the beginning. I've seen every episode, every movie. I've read all the manga. I love it.
I've got a head full of bad wiring, and I've never seen a single episode.
Do you want to join the wonderful world of Sailor Moon?
Okay. Enter laughing. It's hard to believe that was us. It feels like ancient history.
We recorded that a few minutes ago.
Ancient history, but now that I'm a Sailor Moon expert.
You're not an expert?
But I'm trying.
Every week on Sailor Noob, we talk about a new episode of the original Sailor Moon series.
It's all new to me.
And I'm a little more seasoned. I've been a Japanese language student, and I've lived in Japan.
And you use your experiences to talk about the food, fashion, and culture of every episode of Sailor Moon.
What do you do again?
Share in the wonder of a classic anime series.
Good enough. Sailor Noob is a great companion for first-time watchers, and it is a fun hit of nostalgia for the experienced fan.
You can catch the show every Friday wherever you get your podcasts.
And you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr, posting all things Sailor Moon.
One day I shall be the master.
Let's just get through this series first.
Okay.